Welcome to the annual 2-hour Child and Adult Care Food Program, Nutritional Training. I'm Mary Glenn Cromwell, coordinator of the USDA Child and Adult Care Food Program with Child Care Resources in Missoula, Montana. The program that we're bringing to you tonight is a compilation of several workshops that we conducted in the Missoula area. One at the Missoula Votech, one at the Missoula Public Library, and another one here at the MCAT studio. The program is divided up into two segments. The first segment will be presented by Lori Riddle, the state dietitian for the USDA Child Care Food Program, and it is entitled Climbing the USDA Food Guide Pyramid. We will tie the lessons learned from that particular program into a multicultural nutritional unit with children entitled Stir Fry for Small Fry.
Hello. Today we will be talking about the Food Guide Pyramid, which Mary Glenn mentioned. This is the new USDA Food Guide Pyramid right in front of me. We will be talking about the dietary guidelines and how to teach children how to make healthy food choices according to the Food Guide Pyramid. And then we'll also be talking about how do we tie the recommendations of the Food Guide Pyramid into Child and Adult Care Food Program requirements. Because as daycare providers, you know you're on very strict requirements to meet certain meal patterns, and how can we tie these two together? So I'd like to start by going over the dietary guidelines for those of you who are seeking training from Child Care Resources. They have a packet. And on the inside first page is the list of the 1990 U.S. Dietary Guidelines. And the dietary guidelines were developed before the pyramid. The pyramid just came out within this last year. The dietary guidelines were developed in 1990. These guidelines are for all healthy Americans age 2 and up. People with certain disease states or conditions would not be following these, but for, I would say, most of us in this room, just by looking at you, you're healthy, so you would want to follow these, okay? The first one is to eat a variety of foods. The second is to maintain a healthy body and weight. The words in parentheses under there tell you what you would do with in child care. You would offer a variety of foods in order to meet these guidelines. You want to serve meals that help maintain a healthy body and weight. The third guideline is to choose a diet low in fat, saturated fat, and cholesterol. So in turn, those are the foods you want to offer and serve to the children. Fourth, choose a diet with plenty of fruits, vegetables, and grain products. So you want to serve those foods to the children. Use sugar only in moderation. Use salt and sodium only in moderation. And if you drink alcohol beverages, do so in moderation. And to relate that to daycare, you want to promote an alcohol and drug-free lifestyle for the children. Okay, so these are the dietary guidelines, and again, it says on here for child care ages 2 and up. Now, the reason we say ages 2 and up is when an infant or toddler up to the age of 2 should not be on a low-fat diet. Up to the age of 2, you want to be serving them breast milk formula or whole milk. You can put them onto whole milk, but not skim milk or low-fat milk. I think we really start getting it drilled in our heads that we want everything low-fat, but not for under the age of 2. The reason for this is infants at this age, toddlers, are still developing nerve tissues, and brain tissue, and it's very important for them to get fat. We don't want to limit their fat and cholesterol until after age 2. Okay, any questions on that? Don't feel scared to ask questions because we've got a camera. It's much worse for me up here than it is for you, okay? So please ask questions as we go along. Okay, this is the Food Guide Pyramid. If you can't see it from where you're sitting, there is a picture of it in your packet on the last handout. The way it's set up is to illustrate what the dietary guidelines teach us. We see a larger emphasis on bread, cereals, and rice pasta. So this is where the majority of your daily food choices should come from, this group down here. Next, we have vegetables and fruits with more emphasis. And comparing this to the 4 food groups, which you've probably all been pounded with for years, It's basically the same, except that fruits and vegetables have been divided, and there is a heavier emphasis on breads, fruits, and vegetables than there was with the 4 food groups. We have less emphasis on dairy products, milk, yogurt, and cheese, and less emphasis on meats. And this ties in really nicely to the multicultural unit, because if you think about Asian foods or Mexican foods, some of the foods from other cultures, you will realize that this is kind of how their diet is set up. Now, an American diet, typically, if we were to, take our diet now and make it into a pyramid, we might have the others group, the fats. No, we probably have the meats down here somewhere. We really have had a heavier emphasis on protein and meats, but now they're saying we need less of that, because a lot of the fat that we get in our diets does come from the meat group and from the dairy group. So we don't really need to have as much of those foods, but they still are important foods. This top part of the pyramid, it's not at the top because it's the best or it's priority, but it's at the top because it needs to be the smallest. This would be the smallest piece of your diet. This is fats, oils, and sweets, things like salad dressing, mayonnaise, margarine, butter, alcohol. Those things would be in this group. These are the foods that have less nutritional value, fewer minerals and vitamins, but have a lot of calories. Sometimes you might hear this referred to as empty calories. So that would be this little group up here. I'd like you to notice that there are these little symbols in this group. There are circles and triangles. Okay, the circles represent fat, and the triangles are representing sugars. And so you can see there are lots of circles that come down into the meat group, and even some in the vegetables and in the breads. The sugars also come down. There's natural sugar in milk and some added sugars in the sweetened yogurts. You'll find sugars naturally in fruit or added if you're buying, say, sugar-packed peaches, the can. You're going to have extra sugar added. Same with the grain group. If you're eating a Pop-Tart, you're going to have extra sugar in there, or a donut. It's going to have more sugar in it. So keep in mind that within each group, you do also find fats and sugars. They're not all just pushed up here. So in making your choices within each group, you have to keep that in mind. Am I going to choose fruit that's packed in heavy syrup? Am I going to choose fresh fruit? What's going to be better for me? Where am I going to get less sugar? Okay, in your handouts also on page 5, 7, and 8, you have a illustration of how fats and sugars fall down through the pyramid. So you can use that as a reference to just kind of see which foods may be higher than others. And this is a real simple illustration of how all of the foods fit together, and all foods do fit into the pyramid. Kids acquire learned taste, and so if you grow up with a lot of butter and salt, it's hard to give that up, because that's something a taste you develop. So if you get kids used to the natural taste of foods and to foods without a lot of butter and salt and sweetener in them, they begin to have a preference for that. And I know this from personal experience, because I grew up on a ranch, and meat and potatoes diet, same kind of thing, butter on everything. My mom was Swedish, and they butter everything. So lots of bread and butter, but it was real difficult for me when I got into this profession to give a lot of that up. Although I needed to do it, and I did it. And now, for me to go out and try to eat a cheeseburger and fries, I can almost just not even do it, because it just seems like so much grease to me that it's really repulsive. But it's a learned taste, and it's something I had to slowly develop. But once you get away from it, you can see the difference. It's like people that go on low-salt diets say, I don't know how I ever ate a potato chip in my life. I about gagged on one trying to eat it. It was so salty. So it's something that you learn. It's something you can change, but it's a lot easier if we teach these kids right in the first place and not expect them to change later in life. So there are other things you can do, and just not adding it is one thing. Like she said, she doesn't add butter or salt to her corn, for instance. You can use other spices, flavorings to enhance foods. One thing, thinking of corn on the cob, when I was in Houston, they would, in some restaurants, you'd order corn on the cob, and what they would give you is a piece of lime, and you'd rub the lime on the corn and then sprinkle this, it's like a Cajun spice. It was like a red pepper. It might be too strong for kids, but something along that line. It was really delicious. and it was the lime on the corn. Yes?
My daughter instead put salt in her vegetables, a lot of times she's put Parmesan cheese.
Right, okay, instead of salt, she's adding Parmesan cheese, so she's adding some calcium and some good vitamins there. There are a lot of different things you can do, and a lot of spices too that wouldn't add extra calories even. Parmesan cheese has some fat in it, so, but it's not nearly as bad as adding, you know, a big blob of butter to your potatoes or whatever, so that's another good suggestion. I've put together for you in your packet on page, there's the front here, page 2. Says tying together the dietary guidelines, excuse me, the food guide pyramid and the CACFP requirements. And here's a list of ideas, and if you think of some that are not on this list, please share them. The first thing that has always come to my mind is to use fresh foods whenever possible. Now, I know you're very busy and it's nice to have convenience items, but if you can prepare foods in advance, put them in the freezer, it's very helpful. If you're making the foods from scratch and you're using fresh foods, you're going to have control over the ingredients, right? The processed foods are going to be higher in fat, higher in sugar oftentimes, higher in salt. So if you're making things yourself, you have control over that. Okay? So use fresh foods, prepare your foods from scratch, know what you're buying, substitute whole grain flour for white flour. Usually if you substitute about half, you still get a pretty good product in your recipe. So if you took your white rolls and half of the flour you substituted whole wheat flour, you end up with a really nice product. It wouldn't be too tough or anything. Don't overcook your vegetables. And for 2 reasons. The first reason is you don't want to lose the nutrients, as cooking will leach out some of the vitamins. So you don't want to overcook them, and also, are children more likely to eat vegetables that are overcooked or ones that might still be a bit crisp? Crisp, yeah. So 2 good reasons there not to overcook the vegetables. You want them to be eaten. Okay, serve whole fresh fruits and vegetables whenever possible. Use your snacks to round out the day. In the food program for snacks, we give you the choice of serving milk, meat or meat alternates, fruit or vegetable, or a bread alternate. You have to serve 2 of those 4, right? Well, if you want emphasis to be from these food groups, then perhaps you should be planning your snacks to contain a fruit or vegetable and a bread alternate. And that way you're going to be making sure you have more of this on your menu, looking at your whole day, than you may have had you served some kind of meat or milk for them at snack, cheese, something like that. So I would concentrate on serving these foods at snack time. Now at the food program, I'm really anticipating some changes. I saw something come across my desk the other day that said lean meat alternate. It was the meal pattern requirements, and they had changed it from meat alternate to lean meat alternate. So, and our director just went to Kansas City and said that they're really pushing to cut back on the fat that kids are getting in daycare. So if we can be a step ahead of them, that would be really great. So keep that in mind. They may change that and I wouldn't be surprised if they took some of the meats off of the reimbursable list and made them non-reimbursable if they're real high in fat. So we really are pushing and moving towards these recommendations. Okay, so along with using your snacks to provide those extra fruits and vegetables and grains, you can provide extra amounts of these foods at mealtime, and a little bit more than the minimum serving requirement. If you're taking the fat out of children's foods, what are you also taking out? Calories. Anybody that's been on a diet knows that. If you take out the fat, you're taking out calories, but kids need those calories, right? But we don't want to give it to them in the form of fat. We want to give it to them in the form of extra foods that are healthy and good for them. So give them extra vegetables, give them extra bread, cut back on the fat that's in your meats, serve them the lower fat milks, lower fat cheeses. Okay, but make sure they get their calories by offering them enough of the other foods. Okay, we can modify recipes, and also in your packet here I've given you lots of examples on how to modify your recipes. as far as cutting back on fat and cutting back on sugar. You may want to do things like baking and broiling, do less frying, just decreasing the fat in recipes, and I have some ideas in here. And one thing that's been brought up to me several times that people have tried is taking a muffin recipe, which quite often muffins can be very high in fat. I know the ones you buy at the bakery are very high in fat. They leave a nice grease stain on a piece of paper if you let them sit on it long enough. But if you're doing this at home, you can substitute applesauce or yogurt in place of the oil in your muffin mix, and you get a real nice low-fat muffin and a tasty muffin. Have you tried that? And do you find it accepted?
It works in brownies, it works in anything.
It works in brownies too?
Yeah.
Okay,
It works in anything.
great.
They might be a little chewier, but they're real flavorful.
Yeah, and it does change the texture a little bit because fat does make things tender. So it will change the texture, but it's worth it. Don't you think? And if the
Yes, it
kids
is.
will eat it too, then you've got a good product. And I don't ever want to say that there are good foods and bad foods and things you should never use, because all foods are good foods, okay? But there are some foods that we should use less often and concentrate more on the other foods. So if we can make small changes to help adjust our meals and our recipes to fit into this, we're taking a really positive step towards the health of the children now and in the future, and our own health as well. Okay, another thing you might do is if you're serving an item high in fat, serve it with something that's low in fat. Like, do we always have to serve French fries with hamburgers? Or macaroni and cheese with hot dogs? You know, why do we put those high-fat things together? Why not serve a hamburger with some fresh vegetables? Why not serve a hot dog with a green salad? Or serve macaroni and cheese with turkey, some lean meat or something. So think about those things when you're putting your menus together. And again, the suggestion on the bottom of the page is to try recipes from other cultures, as we will see later on this morning. These recipes fit real well into the food guide pyramid. They use a lot less meat. I mean, you know, if you've had Oriental food, you find they use little pieces of meat almost as a condiment, but the majority of the dish is going to be rice and noodles and vegetables, okay? Okay, so there are some general tips and ideas for you. I want to really impress upon you, why are we doing all of this? Why are we coming to you and asking you to do this in daycare? And the biggest reason I can tell you is that children establish their eating habits at a very early age. And those are the habits they take with them throughout their life. It's hard to change those habits once they're learned. And so many children now are spending so much time in daycare. We've got single parent families, we've got dual income families. They're sending their kids to daycare. 2/3 of their meals may be eaten in daycare, sometimes more. So you're probably forming more of their eating habits than their own parents are. And maybe when they're going home, they're getting a fast food meal, because with both parents working, who wants to go home and cook dinner? So you're really probably the most important person in teaching them what to eat in their life. And the reason we want them to eat healthy is because diseases that are related to poor diet habits, such as some cancers and heart disease, are something that builds up over a lifetime of bad habits. It's not something that you reach 55 and boom, you get a heart attack or you come down with cancer because last week you ate 6 eggs and, a big plate of bacon. It's something that happens because when you were this high, you ate that way, and you continue eating that way throughout your life. Yes?
And I also think that the way you eat, I have a little girl in my daycare. She has the hardest time keeping up with any of the other kids. I have her 1 or 2 days a week, and the others can just run like the dickens, and she'll stop and she'll be huffing and puffing. And I know that she probably gets the best food that she has in my house compared to hers. Her dad's trying to go to school, and her mom's working crazy hours. And, I hear, oh, I had chocolate pudding for lunch today, and I'm like, oh my gosh. It just amazes me. And it really makes a difference to the way they can run and play. You know, the healthy ones I have zoom around the playground, zoom around, you know, the house, chasing each other. She has some falls down, and, you know, that's a big difference.
Right, that's a good example. I mean, you're going to, if children aren't fed properly, they're not going to have the energy, they're not going to develop and grow as well as other children are. And that's a very basic lesson in feeding children, is that we need to nourish them to grow. But we also need to nourish them in a healthy way when we think about their whole lifetime. Train them now, establish good eating habits now. A lot of times you're trying to overcome what they're being taught to eat at home. Like chocolate pudding for lunch, for instance, isn't a good idea, but if you can make a difference in their life while they're in your care, you could make a difference in their whole life. So it's really important to remember. We need to also make sure that we're teaching children in a positive way about nutrition. And I've outlined some points on page 4, and I think it's so important that we want to emphasize what to eat and not emphasize what not to eat. I think that public health has made a big mistake in the past. We've all been told, don't eat ice cream, don't eat anything with cholesterol, don't eat this, don't eat that, and it makes you very nervous, and it makes you, of course, want to go eat that. And if somebody told me I could never have chocolate again in my life, the second I left this room, I would go buy a candy bar. I mean, it just makes you crave something to be told you can't have it. So we want to emphasize what to eat, and that's one of the reasons I really like this pyramid, is because it tells you eat more grains and vegetables and eat more fruits. It doesn't really emphasize don't eat this. It says this is okay and it's up here and let's not give it a lot of attention. But this is what we really want you to eat. So it's changed. It's a positive thing now. Also, another point which I said earlier, don't teach good foods and bad foods. All foods are good foods. If you label something, you can only have this when you're good, or use it as a reward, that food takes on a special meaning and a value. We want food just to be equal, and food is food. Rewards are other things, but they're not food. Okay? We want to teach children to identify foods from each group, but what are the best choices within each group? You know, is a donut a better choice, or is a soft pretzel a better choice from the bread group? We want to teach those kinds of things. What's a better choice for most of the time? We want to remember that every meal is giving them a nutrition message. Teaching them, we teach kids what to eat by what we feed them. And please remember, it's your responsibility to serve them healthy foods and to make that food available. It's the child's responsibility to decide if they want to eat it and how much they want to eat. No force feeding. Don't be offended if you make squash and they don't eat it. Okay? Use Kid Appeal. Good example, broccoli trees. Will they be more likely to eat cooked broccoli, or will they be more likely to eat broccoli cut that looks like little trees and you call it broccoli trees? Probably need the raw broccoli that you call broccoli trees. Make it fun for them, especially foods you're not certain that they're going to like. Okay? The last point here is to talk about new foods, or let the children help prepare a new food. Like the squash, for instance. Would you be more likely to want to eat a big pile of orange stuff on your plate you'd never seen before? Or would you be more likely to try it if you saw the squash before it was cut up, you got to help prepare it maybe, you learned where it came from, and then you saw it on your plate? Probably if you knew something about it, you'd be more willing to try it. I've had strange things on my plate in restaurants before, and it's very hard to try it if you don't know what it is for sure. Okay, in your handouts also you've been provided with lots of good information on how to increase fruits and vegetables in your diets. These all came from the Eat Right Montana Coalition, which was on the 5-a-day campaign, 5 servings of fruits and vegetables a day, which is what we should all be shooting for. Research shows that most of us get less than 2. There's some recipes for you, but I'd like you to turn to page 15. There's a little pyramid there where you can keep a food record, or have a child keep a food record to see how your diet fits into the pyramid. If you want to just test yourself, I'd suggest you just try this, put your morning meal in there, and then go through the day. Like for instance, I had a bagel this morning. Half of a bagel is 1 serving of bread, so I've got 2 of the breads already. I had some cream cheese, that would be up here because it's so high in fat. I also had a huge thing of grape juice, which was probably about 3 servings of fruit because it was a large bottle of grape juice. And so, some people see this and they think 6 to 11 servings of bread a day. I doubt it. But if you start writing it in and you look at the serving sizes are given to you on the last handout in your workbook, the Pyramid Plus has the serving sizes listed for you. And you can see it's not that hard to get that many servings in a day. Okay, so I'd encourage you to try that. And also, there's a handout that is a little placemat, and you can have the kids put their favorite foods in here or draw pictures of different foods and color it. You could even laminate it and let them use it at the table. There is also a table tent which you can have them cut out. They can color the pictures in the pyramid. They can draw pictures of foods. And also they can put their favorite activity over here. We don't want to leave out exercise as being part of a healthy lifestyle. So that's another thing that they can use. Okay, from here we're going to tie this into the multicultural meal we have over here. Mary Glenn has a lot of different foods here that probably some of us have never seen before. I admit there are a couple things over there I've never tried before, like quail eggs, for instance. But if we want to expose kids to a variety of foods, we also need to expose ourselves, and it's a fun way to do it. And if you set foods up like this sometimes, and she's going to tell us about them, and we'll be more willing to try them. We know where they came from, and that's the same idea you should use with kids. If you have questions before we move over to this, I will take any questions now. Hopefully, yes.
What can you do as a precaution to all the chemicals that are being sprayed on our fruits and vegetables that we are giving to our kids?
My suggestion is that you do wash your fruits and vegetables when they come in. If you have real concerns about it, I would write to your senators. But my feeling about most of that is that it is pretty strictly regulated. I think there's a lot of panic about it. What happens is people take one thing and can bring it into the public and cause panic, where I don't think it's really something to be panicking about. And not to say you shouldn't be aware of it. I think we all need to be aware of it and have a say about what's happening to our food in the processing. But sometimes we need to take a look at what the alternative is. Okay, if we're not going to treat our food with any kind of preservatives or insecticides, would you be happy to have a piece of fruit on your table that maybe had bugs in it or was half rotten because it's got microbes growing on it? And is that going to be safe for you to eat? I mean, the reason that we have a lot of these chemicals is, look at our grocery stores. We've got fruit all year round. Do you want to give that up? I think our diets are a lot healthier. You need to weigh the alternatives and think about it carefully, like, okay, if we don't do this. And remember that the government is involved, and the government isn't sneaking around trying to sabotage us. They're out there trying to protect us. Those chemicals have been studied by the government. They're regulated how much they can use, how much is allowed. And you always have the option of buying organic fruits and vegetables, which is up to you, but in my mind, most of the things that are in our food system are in those fruits and vegetables as well. It's in the soil, something we should have maybe changed years ago, but it's real difficult to protect yourself from everything. And thankfully, there are a lot of natural occurring chemicals in fruits and vegetables that help counteract some of the chemicals that may be carcinogenic. I had someone call me the other day and say, there's more vitamin C in hot dogs than there is in orange juice. How come hot dogs aren't on the vitamin C list as a good source of vitamin C? Well, vitamin C is added to hot dogs because there's a carcinogen in hot dogs because it's a cured meat. Vitamin C changes that chemical into something that doesn't harm us. So they add that as a way to protect us. So things are done like that also, but you really need to balance out the alternative if you're going to give something up. I remember as a child not having a lot of fruits in the wintertime and remembering apples were only in the fall, and In the summertime is when you got watermelon and cantaloupe and those things, and now we have almost everything all year round. And I think we're all a lot healthier because we're not living on meat and potatoes all winter because that's all that's available, or canned vegetables, canned fruits. So it's your choice what you want to use, but if you feel you have legitimate concerns, I just say, write to your senators, write to Food and Consumer Safety. They can give you good information, articles, good background on those types of issues.
The following segment is a presentation that I gave at the Missoula County Library earlier this year. It is the very beginning of the Stir Fry for Small Fry unit. A lot of our daycare providers have been curious as to why we're dealing with multicultural aspects of education for preschoolers with the child care food program. Their feeling is we need to learn about foods, but we learn about foods by studying different cultures. And this is part of a whole language concept that a lot of nutrition educationists have incorporated. For instance, you can learn about different cultures by studying bread. And one of the books that we have is called Bread, Bread, Bread. And it talks about how cultures around the world eat bread, but in different forms. So for instance, this funny shaped bread here is pita bread. And where would pita bread come from? What country? Well, we think of it in Missoula as being Greek, but it's Middle Eastern, and so it could be from a lot of different countries throughout the world. Learning about breads can also be tied into studying what country does this one represent? French, croissant, right? Let me find another one. Oh, here's a unique bread, and it's hard for you to see it. It's a dumpling, a Chinese dumpling. What country would this one come from? Italy, breadstick. Let me see, we think of it as Jewish. Can anybody think of what it's called? We have some of the darker breads. This one here, it looks like a piece of steak, I'm sure, from where you're sitting, but pumpernickel bread. And what country would we think of that comes from? We think of it more as German. So breads alone, when you're teaching nutritional education and tying in multicultural, they're a wonderful resource to learn about different countries. We have a lot of multicultural resources that are going to be available soon for checkout through multicultural units that can be checked out in conjunction with food program and early childhood training programs. This is becoming very well established throughout the United States because we know that we need to celebrate a lot of different ethnic cultures for children to grow up with a buzzword that's being talked about a lot, anti-bias. Does anybody know what we mean by anti-bias? Come up with your own definition of it. We know what bias is, having a prejudice against something, so anti-bias. Right. And growing up in Montana, I grew up in Laurel, Montana, and I just thought of it as everybody being the same, part of the melting pot. And then when I reflect back on it in the congregational churches there and in the Lutheran churches in Laurel, they always had to hire a minister who was bilingual in both German and in English because there were a lot of German Russians in the community. And it wasn't until after I graduated from high school in 1968 that they started celebrating the German culture by having an annual Herbstfest. They say in German Herbstfest, not Herbstfest. There was a large Scandinavian community, and so different churches would have lutefisk dinners. So in Montana, I grew up thinking that there wasn't a large ethnic community, but actually there was.
However, for me, I didn't feel a part of the majority in the community. My father was an Italian immigrant, and the shows that were on television at that time, most Italians were considered to be part of the mafia. So we really didn't promote the Italian heritage. And although my dad came to this country originally when he was about 5, he went back to Italy and came back when he was 17. And so when he would have friends from Butte, where he lived, come to our home, they would be speaking Italian, but he never shared that part with me because he believed in the melting pot. He believed that he should teach his children to be so immersed into the American culture that we wouldn't be considered a quote-unquote minority. My mother, on the other hand, was a Southerner, and she brought rich ethnic background to our home, a lot of Southern fried food, and a wonderful, unique Southern accent that my friends were all very interested in. But she never really talked about her ethnic roots except to say that she was Irish. And at that time, Irish, you always thought of fun-loving, drinking, having a great time. The part of her culture that she definitely never talked about was the Native American, because she didn't feel in Laurel that there was a Native American community around that would really be of much support to her, so she just never indicated at all that she was part Native American. So I grew up in a community where they were celebrating the Scandinavian heritage and the German heritage, but I really didn't feel a part of it all. And that's basically why when in our times when we're working with early childhood education and you are influencing these children, that we're trying to say it's wonderful to celebrate different ethnic backgrounds, but the most important thing is to teach children that they are special. And that's what this poster is about. Every single child in your daycare is special. And there's something that he or she has about himself or herself that is unique that they can share with the other children in daycare. There are things about you that are unique that you can share with them. And so we don't want to make an emphasis on multicultural education that you single out a child in your daycare that looks different from everyone else, and you want to celebrate that child, but then you ignore the little blonde-haired, blue-eyed child that looks like everyone else. We found in daycare, excuse me, that parents tend to seek daycare providers that reflect values and that appear to be much like themselves because they view you as the surrogate parent. But we have children coming to Missoula that don't look like everyone else. And so their parents are very anxious about taking their children to daycare because they feel that they will be singled out. Now, for this particular unit, we have provided a supplemental handout called Stir Fry for Small Fry, which all of you should have. If any of you are viewing this from home, you would also be given a copy of this to follow along with. But basically what we're saying now in early childhood education is scrap the melting pot philosophy that my dad believed in. Because we're trying to think about multicultural education more as a stir fry. So for instance, if you put all the different ingredients together and overcooked it, you would be melting all those flavors together into one big glob of mush, would you not? And so the unique flavors of each part that you are contributing to your soup would be, or to your melting pot, would be blended so together that everyone would be the same. Isn't that correct? But with stir fry, what's wonderful about stir fry is each ingredient retains its own flavor, but yet it's very important to the whole recipe. So for instance, as we look around the room, we can see that even though we may think we're part of the melting pot, I see brown hair, I see red hair, I see blonde hair, I see black hair, I see gray hair. I see blue eyes, I see brown eyes, I see some hazel, and I see some green eyes. Does anyone else have? I know a member of my family has one blue eye and one green eye. So even as we look around the room and we think that we're all part of the same community and we've all melted together, it's obvious that we haven't. Each one of us is unique and different. And that's why, as we have with this poster, each child needs to feel special. We, in early childhood education, are being instructed to really push anti-bias multicultural education and tie it in with food, and there's a main reason for this. Growing up in Montana, we don't have a Chinatown per se. We don't have a large black community. We're close to reservations, but we're really not on top of the reservations. We don't have a large Hispanic community. And these are the 4 ethnic groups that we read about a lot in the papers, but we basically think Missoula is removed from all of that. On page 3 of the handout you have, there is a section called Preparing for a Changing Society. There are 2 graphics that I'd like you to look at. One shows the results of the 1980 census, and the other one right below it shows the results of the 1990 census. Basically what they're showing us is that the 4 major ethnic groups that I just mentioned, the Native, the Black, the Hispanic, and the Asian, all of those ethnic groups together, the major ethnic groups that we think of, took up 1/4 of the pie. In 1990, you can see that the pie has changed. The projections are that the 4 ethnic groups that I just mentioned combined will take up half the pie by the year 2000. So in other words, the 4 major ethnic groups that we recognize, and I'm not talking about the different Europeans or European populations, but I'm talking about the Black, the Native American, the Hispanic, and the Asian will take up half the population of the United States. And so it's very, very important that we in Montana realize that the children that we have in our daycares today will be migrating throughout the U.S. And any prejudices that we instill in daycare will follow them, and it will make it much more difficult for them to prepare for the future. So this section here is very important for you as early childhood educators to follow up on. What we're doing to try to encourage celebrating the family and celebrating the child is providing you with materials in this booklet that you can take to any copy place, reproduce, and use in your daycare. One of these forms is on page 5. It's a form that you can give to the parents at the time of sign up with your daycare or any time throughout the year. And it asks for general background of information about the child and about the family that they might want to share in daycare. Another follow-up to that might be asking for special recipes that they have that you might prepare in daycare to share Johnny or Susie's favorite recipe at home with the children. So this aid is here to give you a little bit more in-depth background about the family so that you can celebrate each child in daycare throughout the year. Now, another thing that we have here is a multicultural calendar of events that take place throughout the year on page 9 and 10. And this was taken from a publication on multicultural education called Roots and Wings. One thing that we do need to caution, however, is that we want to do ongoing nutritional education all year round. You do not have to wait for Cinco de Mayo, for instance, to celebrate the Hispanic community. You do not have to wait for Hanukkah to celebrate the Jewish community. You do, give me some, St. Patrick's Day to celebrate Irish. Help me out here. Can you think of any others? at any rate, you do not have to wait for the holiday to celebrate a certain ethnic background. A few moments earlier, as we were arriving, a young child was here, Jody Rasmussen's daughter, who is part of the Sons of Norway Nordic dancers. And she was here in her full costume. Now, you have children in your daycare that participate in groups like this. Today we're going to be focusing on the Hmong community, which is the largest Asian grouping of, well, let me see. The Hmong are Laotians that migrated to the United States at the end of the Vietnam era war. And Missoula and Billings are the two cities in Montana that a lot of the Hmong people migrated to. In Missoula, we have 264 Hmong. You probably see a lot of them at our farmers market and throughout town. And we have met with them this year to work on this stir fry for small fry unit because they are the largest Asian grouping in Missoula at this time. However, with the University of Montana, many of you may have had a lot of foreign students in your daycares. There's a large Japanese and Chinese, Singapore, Malaysian, same, group that are here in Missoula right now, and a lot of their children are in the ASUM daycares and in some of your daycares. So what we want you to do is keep this booklet at home. Try some of the recipes with your children. Expose them to new tastes from the Asian culture, combined with the Hispanic cultural unit that we developed last year. Next year, we're going to be focusing on the Native American units, but use the information sheet that we have in here to find out about other ethnic contributions that you have in your daycare in order to celebrate the child. Some of the posters that we have up are things that we wanted you to be aware of, that we've been reading a lot about. We tend to buy coloring books or posters, different supplemental educational materials for our daycare based on the grouping that we have. And now we're learning that it's very important to have posters and literature representing a wide range of ethnic groups. We have books at our Child Care Resources Library that you can check out, such as We Are All Alike, We Are All Different. That's very important for you to share with the children so that each child feels that he or she is just as important or just as special as the children sitting next to them. At this table, when the workshop ends, I'd like you to go through and look at some of the things that you can share every day that you already have in your daycare as you're teaching about multicultural units. You may not go to the expense to buy dolls of different ethnic backgrounds, but it's going to be possible for you to check these out through Child Care Resources in the near future. But you can check out a lot of wonderful books that introduce different cultures. For instance, if you do a stir fry with your children, or make egg rolls or fried rice, or any of the other recipes that we have in the handout, you might want to check out this wonderful book called Clever Sticks, about a little boy who's going to preschool, has a very difficult time understanding how to eat with a knife and fork. His family is newly immigrated into the country, and he doesn't speak the language. He sees the other children doing a lot of things that are new and different to him, and then he goes to the easels that the children are painting at, and he notices that the paintbrushes are a lot like the chopsticks he's used to eating at home. And so he takes the paintbrushes and shows the children how to eat with chopsticks. Now, if you're studying Asian culture in your daycare, it is possible to go into any of the local grocery stores and buy chopsticks, or go to a specialized Asian market if you think you're going to be using them a lot, and buy the plastic ones that we have here. Plastic are very wonderful for daycare because they can go through the dishwasher and be sanitized. The wooden ones shouldn't be used often because a lot of germs can harbor in the old wood and in the pores. So at any rate, locally I bought the plastic ones 10 for $2.99. So again, it's a nice investment for your family if you're doing family home care. But anyway, practicing with chopsticks at the table would be a wonderful exercise for the children, again, bringing in nutrition education, working with their small motor skills. One of the things that we are cooking with today is sticky rice. And I found out after living in Hawaii for a while, that's how people were able to eat rice with chopsticks a lot better than I had been eating Minute Maid with rice. Because, I'm trying to, I don't have the bag handy, but in any of the grocery stores you can buy the Oriental sticky rice. And if you're going to try stir fry with the kids and try chopsticks for the first time, you might want to try that because it sticks together. It doesn't fall through the chopsticks. Another thing that we're going to have available to check out if you are doing a multicultural unit are these fun little chopsticks that I found in Chinatown in San Francisco. Multicultural chopsticks. Knife and fork on one end, chopsticks on the other. Another interesting thing about chopsticks, by the way, is I found out that different Asian countries have different shaped chopsticks. The Japanese, the Chinese, and the Korean, for instance, all have different shapes. Yes, Julie?
And the Japanese cook their rice, the sticky rice, a little bit different, and they rinse it.
Definitely rinse it, and I will be going over that with you today.
We had a Japanese student this last summer. She showed us different ways to cook the rice.
And it's on the bag. It tells you how to rinse it on the bag. Another book that we have here is one of the only books that's been written about the local or about the Hmong culture, which until 1956 we found out they did not have a written language. Everything that they did was with story clause or verbal folk tales or verbal history. And that's one reason if you go to the museum or if you go to a lot of art and craft fairs, you'll see things like the apron that I have on here today, which was made by Mary Yang, who has contributed the recipes in your handout. All very fine stitchery, and they would do this not only for their clothing, but to make story cloths. And in your booklet, there's a craft idea following the whole language concept where you can do a simple story cloth with the kids. Everything that we've included are things that shouldn't cost you anything when you're trying to teach about the cultures. The crafts that we design are things that are made with different scraps around your house or very low-cost materials. One of the crafts would be, we know that Oriental art was very detailed, a lot of watercolors. Here's something very simple that you could do with the children, taking coffee filters and watercolors, letting them draw, sticking them on just a plain paper plate, and then they go home with a silk screen. So I will pass these around. You can see from the different age groups, this one was a real tiny one, about 2 or 3. And all they did was just put the watercolors on and let the colors run together. They don't have to paint designs. So I'll start these so that you can get an idea of something simple for an art and craft follow-up to your nutritional training unit. Another story that we have that you can check out that would follow along with this is Everybody Cooks Rice. And it talks about how different cultures eat rice in different ways. Now here in America, we're very well aware of different cultures that are eating rice. Throw them my way. Different rices that you cook at home. Spanish rice. So Hispanic culture prepares their rice one way. Another one?
Rice pudding.
Rice pudding. Tell me, Sally, where does rice pudding come from? Do you know?
I don't know.
Yeah, I'm trying to
I'm
think
very
of.
German, and my mother used to make it, so I'm assuming it came from somewhere else.
Another suggestion for rice, showing how multicultural rice is, like with bread that we talked about before. rice pilaf.
What about rice cakes?
Rice cakes, yeah, and I'm trying to think of what, are they Japanese? We have Creole rice, which is very ethnic to different parts of the U.S. We have wild rice, which is Native American. Can you think of others? Anyway, this book is wonderful because it follows how here in America we prepare rice in a lot of different ways based on different ethnic cultures. So this too is a nice follow-up to multicultural education and highlighting different ethnic groups. Another one that we have here that's available to check out is called Dumpling Soup. And it's a story about Oriental dumplings served in different ways in Hawaii. And Hawaii is probably what we think of as one of our biggest multicultural states. And it shows how, with the different ethnic groups, they prepare their food within the bread groups. What I'd like to do is share with you some of the local Hmong artwork, and I'm going to be passing these out as prizes. These are wedding ceremonial balls, and the tradition behind them is that young women at gatherings throw the bauble into the crowd, and the man that catches it receives permission to quote unquote date her. So I'm going to toss these out. The person that catches it, it's yours.